Welcome back to Behind the Barricade. I'm Jim Christian. For the past 12 episodes, I've had the privilege of sitting across from some of the sharpest people in this industry and asking them the questions I actually care about. But today, the tables have turned. Chad Cannon, who I've known for 10 years, who has helped shape this whole show, is going to interview me. And we're doing something a little different for the next few weeks. We've paused having guest interviews to step back and pull the threads that keep showing up episode after episode. Today's thread, pre-construction, is where projects are won and lost. And we get into why the shovel hitting the ground should be the easiest part, why the rush to break ground almost always costs you more downstream, and the project where the architect and the mechanical engineer never set foot on the site, and what that one decision costs everybody. If you ever felt the pressure to skip ahead and just start building, here's one for you. Now on to the episode.
Jim, we're here. I am so excited. So excited for today, but also for the next few weeks. As you just heard, Jim did a little intro about myself. I'm Chad Cannon. I have the pleasure of getting to work with Jim and the Cornerstone team, really over the last year on the team. But Jim and I go way back. I don't know. It's probably 10 years,
10 years.
at least. Yeah. It's been incredible. It's been fun to see you grow this company, but also just your own personal journey and health journey, and some just incredible. You're one of my favorite humans I've ever got to spend time with. So,
you're too kind. Likewise.
Yeah.
I guess
I'm excited to jump in.
10 years ago, neither one of us had hair then either. So
This is true. We were bald 10 years ago and we're still bald today. I'm needing a little cut here. So Thanks for the reminder. But, just as an overview, the next couple of weeks, we're going to take a pause from interviewing kind of guests in the industry. How many episodes are we in? We're in 10 episodes, 12 episodes. Wow. And wanted to take a break and record a handful of episodes where we're going to reflect back on what we've learned, some of these kind of common themes that are coming out of the podcast. And Jim has done such a great job of interviewing. Now I get to interview Jim and hear kind of from his perspective stuff that's happening at Cornerstone, some of the things that are coming through the podcast. And so a little bit of the genesis of the podcast. I can remember, you brought me in, or you hired me. You came to Nashville. I'm here. You're up in Toronto. And to say, hey, what got us here isn't going to get us there as a business, which most founders and CEOs kind of get to a place. And so, hey, trusted me, which I'm super grateful for, to think through that. And one of those was, it just felt like there was a missing piece in this industry, kind of around how do we talk about the things that are actually happening. And project management is kind of an overall theme that, you guys offer and support. But really, there's so many project managers out there, but what you guys do is totally different. We came up with this phrase, construction performance management. And I remember talking about it, you kind of lit up. There was something that you said, I forget exactly the line that you said that kind of got us there, where you were like, what did you
we're not project witnesses, we're project managers.
Exactly. Yeah. And you were like, most project managers are project witnesses. Yeah. They don't take ownership of the performance and the outcomes. And one of the things that you've set as core value at Cornerstone, and that is your lifeblood, is that we take ownership of managing that project from all the way from making sure the brand's on point, budget's on point, timeline, all those types of things. So tell me a little bit about kind of that conversation of kind of coming to, what does construction project management look like, or construction performance management? See, I even do it because project management is just easy to roll off the tongue, but performance management is a different thing, and especially in the construction space. So tell me a little bit about kind of what those three words mean to you and how you embody that.
Well, I think construction is construction. We're building things, whatever that is. And it's kind of different than the full project. There's things that the owner needs to be responsible for that we don't necessarily own. We can support them in it. But the key word is performance, right? To own the project from cradle to grave, and having in mind the brand, their requirements, the budget, the schedule, and kind of just shepherding all of the project partners to the successful end project, whether that's a store opening, a restaurant opening, whatever that is, just to make sure that somebody owns it. One of the things that we're finding more and more and more is people the research shows that productivity is flat in construction. So that's what
Mm.
kind of precipitated all this. We're finding more and more that the projects are being managed from phone call to conference call, where people need to do the work between those calls to advance the project. So that hour
Mhm.
call every week or every 2 weeks really isn't project management. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
we really try to live into, we own that project and all components of it, and need to really shepherd the whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. I think of that just in construction, but I think that's the reality in most industries.
Yeah.
Let's have a meeting about the meeting. Let's have a meeting about the things we need to do rather than actually do it and someone who's going to own the performance and the outcome. And so great project managers manage performance. And that's what we got to, right? And say, hey, at the end of the day, we want to be known for managing the performance. And when we take on a client, that a client walks away at the end being like, we could have never done this without you. And
Yeah.
here's the next 4 or 5 projects that we have coming down the pipe because we can't do this without you moving forward. So
Exactly.
we're now 12 episodes in. We've had some movers and shakers in the industry, some pretty big names that have accomplished a lot of big things. We've learned a lot. I've got to sit in with some of the guests, and they've just been blown away by how great of an interviewer you are, how grateful that you were to invite them and to be able to share, because not a lot of people in this space get to share about what they do.
Yeah.
They're just kind of head down doing it. So it's been really fun to kind of see and hear that feedback. So we're going to explore some themes. So today's theme that we're going to explore is pre-construction is where projects are won and lost. It feels like almost every episode, pre-construction was a big theme that came up. And so I think sometimes, one of the things is like, it's not always thought through. It's just like, hey, let's just jump in, or, we're in the 11th hour of getting this thing breaking ground. Now we got to figure out what we're doing. But the great projects that saw this kind of performance breakthrough, pre-construction is where things really happened and where things really fell behind. I'd love for you just to kind of talk through, when you say pre-construction, and to you, and I know you have this point around things being created twice.
Mm.
So tell me a little bit about that as it relates to pre-construction.
Yeah, well, the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, it's an old classic in my mind. Sad to say that I read the first edition in the late 80s. But
So you're a classic, Jim. You're a classic.
I'm a classic, yeah. Dusty and classic. But Stephen talks about this process of the things are created twice. They're created first in our minds and in creation, and then they're created physically. And I think pre-construction kind of sits in that continuum, in that when things are being created initially, when designs are being formatted, when creative energy is coming into it, that's happening, and it's really exciting. It's really exciting for the owner. It's really exciting for the architects and the designers. But the reality is, at the other end, we have to construct it. And I think the learnings that we've had over the years is, and it's come up repeatedly through the podcast, that the sooner in pre-construction you can get your team together and get all pointed in the direction that you need to be pointed in, the better it is. So often in construction, everything is siloed. Design, pre-construction, construction, all these things get siloed. So you lose that wisdom and vision if that
Hmm.
happens. Yeah, it gets on a drawing and all that. But if everybody on the project that can be, meaning the owner, the designers, the engineers, the project managers, can all be at the table in those early days to kind of say, okay, this is how we're going to get this to the finish line. It's so important. It's really is key to being able to have the successful project, to have that
Yep.
up.
I'm curious. I mean, every project may be different, but if you could give me like a rough timeline, how I'm playing kind of the dumb grandpa here because I'm not in the industry, kind of the outsider, which is kind of nice at times. Is how long of a process should the pre-construction be in your mind? Again, probably every project's a little different, but if you were to say, hey, kind of middle of the road, rough timeline.
Yeah. You're right. It does vary a lot based on the project, the size and the complexity of it. All I know is there's never enough, right? We need to get on it. We're in the design of a restaurant in Florida right now, and the push will be to be able to start construction in November.
Hmm.
And there's a chance it might slip beyond into next year just because of permitting and the timing that the owner wants to have it open. But if you include design in the pre-construction element, it can be months to get it to the
Hmm.
point that you
Hmm.
can break ground, if you want to call it that. It all depends. If design is done, it's definitely a 6 to 8 week program minimum if the design is already locked and loaded. But
Hmm.
there's going to be a
Yeah.
lot of time
Yeah.
spent at design.
Yeah. And then tell me a little bit about why having you involved, you and your team at Cornerstone, is super important to be involved in pre-construction when you take on a job. Because I know my guess is just knowing how other industries are, they look for a vendor and sometimes they bring you in and maybe sometimes that's already done. You're like, oh, we just want this. And how hard it is to kind of unravel, kind of go backwards to go forwards. This idea of beginning with the end in mind and having a partner there at that time, why that's really so important. And maybe even some examples as to where that was done, where you were like, hey, we were brought in. This has allowed us to do X, Y, and Z. And when we weren't on the pre-construction, this is what ultimately happened.
Yeah, I think the key to getting us involved earlier is we're able to help the project and the owner understand what the risks are potentially with the property or
Hmm.
that they're looking at and the opportunities. When you start to think about the budget and the capex required to fulfill a project, you want to make sure you have assessed the risks and the opportunities in a site, get them into the design before they become change orders at the end. So
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
getting in earlier is better because then we have visibility and we can look for mechanical issues, structural issues, constructability issues that aren't necessarily seen if we aren't on site in the time between letter of intent and signing the lease. So it really helps understand the budget because at the end of the day, the owner has a budget that needs to be set that produces a return on investment for them. There's just that control of how do we control that budget and be as good stewards with the budget as we can be.
Got
I think for us, we've had lots of success in when we're involved with pre-construction, especially if there's a rollout of any sort. How do we get efficiencies in procurement of product? How do we get
it. Hmm.
efficiencies in having one vendor that's going to look after a segment of it if it's a rollout? Or maybe it's learning about the building and the landlord and some intel that the landlord can give us about contractors or subtrades that are been very successful in their building or are required, in fact, in their building. So kind of getting all those pieces put together is critical over the years. The earlier we're involved with that, with the team, it's not just us, it's the architect, it's the engineer, it's the owner,
Hmm.
just to really keeping that end in mind on where we want to be. Like what are the obstacles that we're going to run into? And, just that, we have a core value at Cornerstone, relentless efficiency, breaking down the roadblocks, seeing them beforehand so that they don't become a blockage in the construction site.
Love it. Love it. So it feels like when I look back and listen to the episodes, it was like almost everyone talked about this. I'm curious, is pre-construction something that you feel like with clients you have to fight for, or people really understand it? Do they think that it's shorter than it actually is? Is part of that when you're really talking through the process? Is this something that people want to shortchange or not? Again, this is me being curious.
I think it can be sometimes that the owner may not really get a sense of who they want on the team and they haven't done the work to determine that, or often there's a cost associated with it and they may not have the capex approved yet, so it slips
Hmm.
into the next cycle. I think everybody knows the importance of it, but
Hmm.
the rush to get to the end gets in the way.
Hmm.
A. Brown has this line. I can't do the exact quote, but she says it always seems easier to steal time from today and move it to tomorrow, right? Like the
Hmm.
tomorrow never comes where you have time, right? So
Totally.
every time we shortchange, every time
Hmm.
we get in a rush, there's always a problem downstream, right? That just
Totally.
needs to be
Yeah,
worked.
it reminds me actually this week, I kind of built out we used a full focus planner. I built out my week, kind of my big three, and then my daily big three almost for the week. Like every day I knew kind of what my daily big three was. I normally can't do that, but I was like super clear. And Monday I was like done with my big three by like 10 a.m. And I was like, okay, I can either do other things or focus on tomorrow and kind of get ahead, which I don't
Yeah.
normally do. This is not me too much, like, but it makes me think of this is I knocked out my daily big three for Tuesday and Wednesday on Monday. So
Wow.
like, I mean, I was like massively productive on Monday. And little did I know on Tuesday, I had three things pop up that I could not have done if I didn't do the work on Monday. So this just makes it's like if you do the work, it allows you to pivot a lot easier along the project, right? Because things are always going to come up. Construction always goes perfect, right? Like there's never things that
Only
come
when
up.
we're involved.
Yeah. So I think it's just real. It's so good that it just reminds me like when you've got a plan and you can stick to the plan and you kind of have benchmarks to know and know that, hey, we're managing this at the end of the day. It's all about performance. That when something comes up, a curveball, a change order happens, it makes it a lot easier to put that in, especially if all the stakeholders. That's what I'm hearing on the pre-construction. It's going to make all of those things that we know that are going to happen on a construction project and a timeline. It makes those things easier, not easy, but easier. Construction's hard. Yeah. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, Tomomi had this line in the episode that she did that we need schedules that are realistic and that we make sure that everybody understands why they're realistic. So often, I think in pre-construction, well, schedules can get produced that aren't realistic, but we need the time to make them realistic. And then we need to show the stakeholders all the work behind the schedule as to why it's going to take this long or not take this long, whatever the case is.
Hmm.
There just never seems to be enough time, and everybody has the right messaging and can see the work that got you there. That makes it easier.
Yeah. I think it's just there's something about, I mean, just even thinking this is like because you have so much experience working on multiple projects and different verticals, all of that. I'm just curious, what are some of the brands you've worked with, stores that you've
Uh,
come to love?
yeah, Luxottica, they own Sunglass Hut, Ray-Ban, LensCrafter, Adidas, Reebok. You know, those are probably the biggest names. Gap, then Old Navy is other clients that we've had. Sweet Green has been a client, so
I love seeing your countenance. You just sort of like, Chad, why are you doing this to me? Why do you have to, have me toot my own horn? You're just like, your countenance was just like, you're so humble, Jim. I appreciate that about you. Yeah, to some of the biggest names in the business, which is pretty exciting. And I bring that up to life in just that I think sometimes internally, project managers maybe are green. They don't have as much experience. And that's why the value of bringing someone like Cornerstone on the project is super important because you have this wealth of knowledge, this experience that in reality will save them money, right? Like it is true, like, this idea, I remember us talking about it. Like at the end of the day, I mean, sometimes companies see you as an expense, but you really wanted to see them as saving money. Talk a little bit about that, as even in the lens of pre-construction, because when you do that right, how you can save them money. At the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do, right?
yeah, we're just launching a project in Florida for a university, and we're in pre-construction right now, and we got the bids back, and it took some time to level the bids and to understand it. But at the end of the day, we saved significant money because the contractor didn't have some things in and had too much of other things in. So at the end of the day, we saved the university a couple $100,000, which far exceeds our fee, but it takes time, right? We
Yeah.
we could have easily been, well, let's just take the low bid, but that wouldn't have been the best strategy, right? Like you've got to do the work. And we got a little pushback saying, why is it taking so long? Well, it takes time, right? It takes time
Hmm.
to get the
Yeah.
answers, to ask the questions, to move people forward in understanding it, and really try to get a sense of where are their savings? Where can we
Hmm.
generate
Hmm.
savings to cover our fee and more? That's
Yeah.
really the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me, but just having these conversations. I'm in a golf community that's been building. I mean, there's like 350 homes. Homes are being built. All of them are custom. So everyone's designing from scratch, all this stuff. Every project is, and I can tell you right now, I've never heard anything good when someone chose the low bid. It always like problems end up surfacing down the road, cost way more money. A lot of times that's just because maybe they didn't have all the details. They were bidding on something because of that type of thing, or they're wanting the business and they're new and they don't know,
Right.
what it's going to take. And then at the end of the
Well,
day, they
yeah.
pass the cost on, right?
And some owners will take that strategy that we're going to take the lowest bid because that we have margin in our capex to offset the change order. That can be a strategy. I'm not
Yep. Yep.
fan of that strategy, but definitely can be a strategy. I think part of the thing too with pre-construction is really think of Jenny Kim from Canada Goose when she talked about procuring that storefront to ensure successful closing. She did that really early in the cycle,
Mhm.
but that took some creativity, that took some thought, it took some, okay, let's get out of the normal box to how do we do that to be successful? And we've done that over the years with other clients where how do we ensure the success when you have that end in mind of we want to open on this date and that can't move? How do we do that? Similar to Tomomi saying that they did all the permitting on that site to allow the brand to come in and get open on the date they
Mhm.
to open in the development. So it really just the key of having the team around the table that how do we change this? How do we make it happen
Mhm.
and communicate that to the stakeholders?
Yeah, I love it. You, I've heard you mention kind of this 20-mile march idea, which I think you got from Jim Collins,
Yep.
this kind of 2 types of self-imposed discomfort. Kind of walk
Mm,
me through kinda that. I think that's a good place based on what we're talking about right now.
yeah, Jim and I talk regularly. He's got me. What an
Mm.
interesting guy is. But yeah, this 20-mile march really is to move forward towards the goal, whether you are comfortable or uncomfortable, that you just got to
Mhm.
keep going. So oftentimes, I think if we get uncomfortable, we will stop marching forward because
Mhm.
there's too much resistance, there's too much headwind, there's just too many obstacles that we see. So that's one thing. We
Mhm.
have to keep going. So
Mhm.
if in the case of pre-construction, if the opening date's here and we're here, we keep marching towards it and do it. The other thing that can happen is if it's too easy, we can kind of sit back and go, okay, we don't have to do the 20-mile march. So it's being comfortable with the discomfort and making sure that we're always moving it forward. That discomfort has to be always there and putting pressure on us to sometimes it's self-imposed, sometimes it's situation imposed is the way I look at
Totally.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so pre-construction, I mean, look, just trying to sum things up. I mean, I remember, I think it was the first episode with Virginia Grant from Luxottica. I asked the timeline earlier. One thing she said is like 8 weeks is the minimum. Whether this is to do pre-construction well, whether it's a flagship, one that they've done all the time, right? It's just kind of rinse and repeat, or if it's a standard fit out, kind of custom, that's going to be what that is. What are kind of your final kind of parting thoughts as it relates to pre-construction, why it matters? I know you touched on it a little bit, but kind of summarize why it matters and what the outcome is if it's not done well, and maybe an example of where you've seen it not go well. Maybe we just keep the names and parties out, but maybe the example, if you've had one. I can't. You've worked on 1,000 projects. I'm sure you have a few of those examples. Unfortunately.
Yeah, just Virginia had a good line in the podcast, something about like when the shovel hits the ground, it should be easy going forward, right?
Hmm.
That should be the easiest step in the whole process. And I think she summed that up well. That if we're doing pre-construction right, that's true. That should be
Hmm. Yep.
true. That when we start the project, everything's aligned. The drawings are aligned. The vendors are aligned. Contractors are aligned. We know who the subs are. We know procurement's done or what any procurement issues are. So getting started is the easiest. We have this line on dedicated to creating a better journey, right? So
Hmm.
there's twists and turns. There always will be. But if you do pre-construction right, the journey should be better than if you don't. Yeah, pre-construction, when it's not done right, it's painful.
Hmm.
We were involved with a project where the mechanical and architect never went to site. And it was a significant project. And we had an obstacle on that site and it took them forever to come to the site. But in
Hmm.
pre-construction, that would have changed everything. In
Hmm.
this case, we were not the project management firm, we're the contractor. But when we see it regularly, if those kinds of things aren't done, it just becomes a headache for everybody, from the owner through to the
Hmm.
subtrades. And it costs time, which costs money, which causes just the roller coaster ride of it not being done right. So it's an investment. It's an investment that pays dividends in both financial, in schedule, and in all elements of it. So I would just encourage everybody, whether you're engineer, contractor, project manager, the more emphasis we can put on pre-construction with our clients, with the senior management of our clients, the more productive, more profitable for everybody
Mhm.
the project will be. And when I say profitable, it's more profitable for the owner if they open on time, maybe even open a little early, get the revenue
Mhm.
going. That's what it is. If the capex is at or below what the budget spend was, that's profit for them, right? It's where the game can be made or lost in a big way.
Totally. Totally. Well, that was, I think, some really good information around pre-construction. It's one of those, like, again, the point of this series is to really talk about the themes that have come out. And I think when we look back at these first 12 episodes, pre-construction was hugely important, especially when we highlighted projects that really worked. When our
Yeah.
guests came on and really shared about, hey, we couldn't have done this without the proper pre-construction. So if you're listening to this and you're at a place, you've got an upcoming project, or just as you guys think through this and part of your process, whether you bring Cornerstone in or not, I know I'll speak from Jim's heart. Jim at the end of the day wants you guys to have the most successful project, is to really build this into your process. And I think kind of a lesson I'm hearing is that it takes more time than we think it does. It
Yeah.
takes more people than we think it does. It's not just the owner and the project manager or the ops person. You mentioned it's the architect, it's the mechanical engineer. It's depending on what your project is, there needs to be all those key stakeholders. And part of working with someone like Jim and Cornerstone is you get to identify who those people are and then probably share what that looks like. So we touched on pre-construction. This next episode I'm super excited about here that is going to be released next is relationships over transactions. We're going to
Mm.
dive into relationships. I've known Jim for 10 years. I've gotten to be into his world a little bit. So I've seen some of the relationships that are important to him. But this project's been really fun for me because I've gotten to sit on with some of the guests and they share how they've got to meet Jim over the years and to see the relationships that Jim has formed. So I cannot wait to get to interview you, Jim, about relationships and why it's so important in this industry. So that's what we're going to dive into next. So in a couple of weeks, make sure you tune into the next episode as we jump into why relationships are important and how they can have an impact on your project and your project's performance succeeding what you think is possible. So tune in next time. Appreciate it, Jim.
Take care. Thanks for doing such a great job interviewing me, Chad. So that's pre-construction. And if there's one thing I want you to walk away with is this. When the shovel finally hits the ground, that should be the easiest part. If you're scrambling once construction starts, the problem almost always traces back to work that didn't happen early enough. Jim said something that stuck with me. The rush to get to the end is what gets in the way. It always feels easier to steal time from today and push it to tomorrow. But that tomorrow never shows up with extra hours waiting for you. And the part I keep thinking about, pre-construction takes more time and more people than most of us assume. It's not just the owner and the project manager. It's the architect, the engineer, the contractor, everybody at the table, early, pointing in the same direction. If this episode was helpful, do me a quick favor. Leave us a rating and a review wherever you're listening. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. It genuinely matters. Reviews are how this show reaches the next person who's about to break ground and doesn't realize what they're skipping. You're leaving a few words helps somebody you'll never meet run a better project. Next time, we're getting into something close to my heart, relationships over transactions, and why they might matter more than anything else in the business. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.